I am 90 years old, and tonight my hands shake so badly that the spoon rattles against the bowl. Margaret lifts it gently, patient as dawn, and blows on the soup before guiding it to my lips. The shocking truth is not that I am dying. It is that the woman I betrayed for decades is the only one still here, washing my body, cleaning my mess, whispering my name like a prayer I never earned. If you're listening to this story, take a moment and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Maybe distance makes confession easier. The night it all cracked open, I woke choking on my own breath. The room smelled of medicine and old wood. My legs wouldn't move. I tried to stand and fell hard, a useless heap, and I cried out not for God, not for a son, but for Margaret. She came running, hair loose, robe tied wrong, eyes full of fear that belonged to love, not duty. When the paramedics left and the house went quiet, she knelt beside me and said, "I've got you, Henry." That was the moment. Not the affairs, not the lies. The moment I realized I would die held by the woman I had spent my life cutting. I met Margaret when we were young and hungry. I was 22, full of noise and plans, a salesman who thought charm was a passport. She was calm, strong, a nurse who believed people healed better when they were seen. We married fast, built a small home in a tidy town, and promised to grow old together. I promised. I broke it early. I learned quickly how easy it was to be admired. The road gave me hotel bars and bright laughter. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I was providing. I told myself Margaret didn't want to know. The lies stacked neatly like folded shirts I never wore. At home, she cooked, listened, and waited. She never searched my pockets. She never raised her voice. Her silence became my permission. My parents praised me for success. My friends slapped my back. They joked about men being men. No one asked about the woman setting the table alone. When our first child died before taking a breath, I ran from the grief into another woman's arms. Margaret buried sorrow in work and prayer. I buried it in pleasure and shame. Years passed like that, me split in half, her carrying the whole weight. I aged into importance and then into frailty. The women faded. Phones stopped ringing. Names slipped away. When my body began to betray me the way I had betrayed my vows, I expected the world to show up the way it once had for my appetite. It didn't. Tonight, as Margaret steadies the spoon, my mind runs backward. I remember the first time she caught a scent on my jacket and said nothing. The night she asked if I was happy, not if I was faithful. The day she found a note I forgot to hide and folded it back into the drawer without a word. I mistook her mercy for weakness. I was wrong. There are others in this house only in memory. A brother who borrowed money and never repaid it. Friends who drank my wine and laughed at my stories. They vanished when the stories stopped being funny. When I needed rides to appointments, when my hands failed, when my pride cracked, they were gone. Margaret remained, steady as a lighthouse I pretended not to see. She hums while she cleans me, a small sound like a thread stitching the air. Every touch burns with guilt. I want to confess everything, but the words feel selfish now, another burden to hand her. Sometimes she catches me starring and smiles, tired but kind. I do not deserve that smile. That is the sharpest truth. I wonder what she knows. I wonder what she chose not to know. I wonder if love can be an act of stubborn courage rather than blindness. I want to ask her why she stayed, but fear locks my tongue. The house creaks. The clock ticks like a judge. Later, when she helps me into bed, I see a small envelope on the dresser with my name written in her careful hand. My chest tightens. I have never seen it before. She notices my gaze and turns it face down too quickly. "Rest," she says. "We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word trembles with promise and threat. As she turns off the light, I realize I am afraid, not of dying, but of living long enough to face what that envelope holds. Morning comes softly now. Light leaks through the curtains like it's afraid to wake me. Margaret is already moving around the room, her footsteps careful, as if the floor itself might break under my weight. She helps me sit up, adjusts the pillows, wipes my face before I can ask. Every action is practiced, gentle, and that gentleness hurts more than anger ever could. The envelope stays on the dresser face down. I pretend not to see it, but my eyes keep drifting back like a guilty child. My heart pounds harder than it should. At 90, fear feels different. It's quieter, deeper. It settles in your bones. As Margaret spoon feeds me oatmeal, I drift back again, back to the years when I still walked strong and proud, back to when I believed consequences were for other people. I grew up in a house where men were praised for appetite. My father cheated openly. My mother swallowed her pain with silence and Sunday smiles. "A good woman keeps the family together," she used to say, eyes fixed on the sink. I learned early that love meant endurance, not honesty. When I met Margaret, I saw her strength and mistook it for the same kind of silence. I thought she would endure me the way my mother endured my father. My friends fed that belief. They called me lucky. They called me smart. They never called me wrong. When Margaret would ask where I'd been, I'd smile and kiss her forehead, tell her a half-truth wrapped in affection. She never pushed. That was the cruelest gift she gave me, trust without interrogation. There was a woman named Claire. I remember her because she once asked about my wife. "Doesn't she get suspicious?" she said, laughing. I laughed too and said, "Margaret believes in me." Even now, those words taste bitter. I used my wife's faith as camouflage. At home, Margaret built a life that waited for me. She saved newspaper clippings about places we might visit one day. She kept my favorite mug on the shelf even after it chipped. She remembered everything about me. I remembered almost nothing about her inner world because I didn't want to know what my choices were doing to it. The first time my health failed years ago, I was terrified. Chest pain, hospital lights. Margaret slept in a chair beside my bed, her hand on mine all night. One of the women I'd been seeing promised to visit. She never did. I noticed, but not enough to change. I told myself I'd be better. I was. Now I need help with everything. Margaret helps me bathe. She trims my nails. She listens when I ramble. No one else calls. The phone sits silent except for doctor reminders. The loneliness I avoided by chasing bodies has finally caught me, and it feels vast. Late in the afternoon, Margaret steps out to take a call. I hear her voice from the hallway, tight, controlled. When she returns, her eyes are red, but her posture is firm. She picks up the envelope and places it in my lap. "It's time," she says. My hands tremble so badly she has to help me open it. Inside is a stack of old letters. Not mine, hers. They are addressed to me, dated decades ago. Confessions I never read, pages filled with questions, pain, and love. One letter describes the night she knew for sure I was unfaithful. Another talks about how she chose to stay, not because she didn't know, but because she believed my brokenness didn't cancel my humanity. I never confronted you, she says quietly, because I didn't want to win an argument. I wanted to save my heart. The words crush me. I try to speak, but nothing comes out except a broken sound. She continues, voice steady but eyes shining. I'm not here because you deserve it, she says. I'm here because I chose the kind of person I wanted to be. For the first time in my life, I am truly exposed, not accused, not forgiven, seen. I realized then that my greatest betrayal wasn't the women. It was stealing her right to decide with the truth. I robbed her of honesty, and she paid the price alone. She takes the letters back and stands. Rest, she says again, but this time it sounds like a boundary, not a comfort. As night falls, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling. I know now that love is not proven by how much someone tolerates, but by how much truth they are allowed to hold. And I am terrified that my chance to give her that truth may already be gone. What would you have done if you were in my place, or in Margaret's? Have you ever seen someone stay out of love, not blindness? Share your thoughts and where you're watching from in the comments. That night sleep refuses to come. My body lies still, but my mind paces like a man looking for an unlocked door. Margaret sleeps in the chair beside my bed, her head tilted back, mouth slightly open, the lamp casting a soft halo around her gray hair. Even in rest, she is watching over me. I wonder how many nights she spent like this while I was somewhere else, chasing a version of myself that never really existed. The letters sit on the dresser now, stacked neatly again, as if they've always belonged there. I know their weight without touching them. Each page is a year I stole. Each sentence is a choice I made without her consent. In the early hours, I finally drift into a shallow sleep and wake with a sharp pain in my chest. Panic rises fast. I call her name, weak and frightened. She is up instantly, pressing the call button, whispering calm words. The pain fades, leaving behind a heavy exhaustion. When the nurse leaves, Margaret doesn't scold me. She just sits, holding my hand, counting my breaths like they matter, like I matter. In the days that follow, something shifts between us. She is still kind, still attentive, but there is a careful distance now, like a door gently closed instead of slammed. She doesn't linger longer than needed. She doesn't fill the silence with stories anymore. The love is still there, but the sacrifice has changed shape. I start thinking about the people who vanished, friends who promised loyalty, women who swore affection, even family members who took more than they gave. I see now how conditional all of it was. I was useful once. I was entertaining. I had money and motion. When I became slow and needy, I became invisible. Margaret never needed me to be impressive. She needed me to be honest. I failed her at the simplest thing. One afternoon, my son, our only living child, comes by. He stands awkwardly in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes darting around the room like he's afraid the past might speak. We were never close. I was present in name, absent in spirit. Margaret fills the gaps between us with politeness and tea. He talks about logistics, care schedules, paperwork. He avoids looking at me. When he leaves, he hugs his mother tightly and gives me a nod that feels more like closure than affection. I don't blame him. He learned distance from me. Later, I ask Margaret if she's tired. She pauses before answering. "I'm careful," she says. That word stays with me. Careful, not bitter, not angry, careful. I decide then that silence will no longer protect me. If I am going to die soon, and I feel it coming like a tide, I refuse to leave this world without finally telling the truth, even if it costs me the comfort of her presence. That evening, when she's adjusting my blanket, I ask her to sit. "I need to say something," I tell her. My voice cracks like an old door. She sits, hands folded, eyes attentive but guarded. "I knew you knew," I say, "and I let you carry it alone. I told myself your silence meant forgiveness, but it was just my cowardice." She doesn't interrupt. Her face is still. "I was wrong about everything that mattered," I continue. "I thought being wanted meant being alive. I didn't see that being faithful was the real courage. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to hear the truth from my mouth, not from letters." For a long moment she says nothing. The clock ticks, my heart pounds. Finally she speaks. "I already made peace with the past," she says softly. "What I haven't decided is what to do with the present." Those words hit harder than any accusation. I realize then that care does not equal obligation. She is here by choice, not because she owes me redemption. The next morning I wake to find her packing a small bag. My chest tightens. "I'm not leaving," she says before I can ask. "I'm staying with my sister for a few days. I need space to breathe as myself, not just as your caretaker." Panic flashes through me. The house feels suddenly enormous and empty, even though she's still standing there. "I'll arrange help," she adds. "You won't be alone." But I already am. Alone with my thoughts. Alone with the wreckage of a life built on avoidance. As she heads toward the door, she turns back. "Henry," she says, voice steady, "love without truth is just endurance. Don't confuse the two." The door closes behind her with a soft click that sounds louder than any slam. I stare at the ceiling again, but this time there is no envelope, no hand to hold mine, no humming in the background. Just the weight of my own choices settling in. And for the first time, I understand that the greatest fear is not dying alone, but realizing too late that the person you hurt most may finally choose themselves over you. The house feels different the moment Margaret leaves. Not emptier, just honest. Every sound echoes. The clock ticks too loud. The refrigerator hums like it's annoyed to still be working when I barely am. A hired caregiver comes in that evening, a polite woman who calls me sir and follows a checklist. She does her job well, but there is no history in her hands, no memory, no love. When she leaves, the silence presses down on me like a confession I can't escape. Days pass. My body weakens, but my mind sharpens in a painful way. Without Margaret's presence to soften the edges, memories arrive uninvited. Faces I haven't thought about in years. Hotel rooms. Promises whispered and forgotten. I remember how powerful I felt being desired, how small I made my marriage in comparison. I remember telling myself that as long as Margaret stayed, I couldn't be that bad of a man. That life finally collapses. My son calls once, short conversation. He asks how I'm doing, not how I'm feeling. I tell him I'm fine. He says he's busy. We both lie because it's easier than rebuilding something this late. When the call ends, I realize I raised him the same way I lived, with distance, with performance, with avoidance. One afternoon, I asked the caregiver to bring me the old box from the hall closet. Inside are photos Margaret kept. Not me, her, us. Trips I barely remember because I was already distracted by what came next. In every picture, she is leaning toward me. In none am I leaning toward her. The proof is unbearable. That night I dream I'm young again, strong, walking without pain. Margaret is across the room, smiling. I reach her and she steps back, not angry, not sad, just unwilling. I wake up gasping, my heart racing, my pillow damp with tears I don't remember crying. The next morning, Margaret returns. She looks rested, clear-eyed, like someone who finally slept without listening for another person's breath. She sets her bag down calmly and asks how I am. I tell her the truth. I'm afraid, I say. She nods, so am I. She tells me about her sister's house, about long walks, about remembering who she was before she became careful all the time. I listen, really listen for the first time in decades. When she finishes, I ask the hardest question I've ever asked. Why did you stay all those years? She exhales slowly. At first hope, then habit, then fear, and then responsibility. Somewhere along the way, I forgot to ask if staying was costing me myself. The words land like a verdict. I realize then that love does not erase damage. It absorbs it until it can't anymore. I don't want you here out of guilt, I say. I don't want to die being tolerated. She looks at me for a long time. And I don't want to live my last years disappearing, she replies. There it is, the final negotiation. Not between husband and wife, but between two aging people deciding how much truth they can live with. That evening she helps me into bed, slower than before, more deliberate. When she turns to leave the room, I stop her. If you decide not to stay, I say, barely able to speak, I will understand. She closes her eyes. When she opens them, they are wet but steady. I need one thing from you, she says. Not apologies, not explanations. I need honesty without trying to control the outcome. I nod. It's the only currency I have left. The next day she brings papers, legal documents, arrangements, not divorce but boundaries, care plans, time away. Space defined in ink so it can't be eroded by pity. Signing them feels like swallowing broken glass, but I do it. For once I choose truth over comfort. That night alone again, I feel something unexpected beneath the fear. Relief. The kind that comes when pretending finally ends. But just before midnight, pain tears through my chest like lightning. I can't breathe, I call out. No answer. I fumble for the call button, knocking it to the floor. The room spins, my vision darkens. As everything starts to fade, one thought crashes through the fog, louder than the pain itself. If this is the end, will she come back because she chooses to, or because she feels she has to. Have you ever watched someone finally tell the truth when it might cost them everything? What would you have done if you were Margaret or if you were me? Share your thoughts in the comments. I don't know how long I was gone. Pain has a way of stealing time and turning it into a blur. When my eyes finally opened, the first thing I saw was light, harsh, white, unforgiving. The smell of antiseptic filled my nose. A machine beeped steadily beside me, reminding me that I was still here, whether I deserved to be or not. Then I saw her. Margaret sat beside the bed, not in panic, not in tears. She was calm, composed, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't holding me this time. She was simply present. The doctor later told me I'd had a severe episode. "You're lucky," he said. I almost laughed. Luck had nothing to do with it. Luck left my life a long time ago. What remained was choice and consequence. When we were alone again, I searched her face for answers I was afraid to ask for. "Did they call you?" I whispered. "Yes," she said. "You didn't have to come," I added. "I know." That was the difference, she knew. She told me she stood in her sister's kitchen when the call came. She didn't rush out immediately. She sat down. She asked herself one honest question. Am I going because I want to, or because I'm afraid of the guilt if I do? She stayed still until she had an answer. "I came because I wanted to," she said quietly. "Not to save you, not to prove anything, but because I decided I could show up without disappearing." Those words did something to me. They didn't comfort me. They corrected me. In the days that followed, my body declined faster. Walking became impossible. Eating took effort. Even speaking felt like lifting weights with my lungs. But inside, something strange happened. For the first time, I stopped trying to earn forgiveness. I stopped trying to bargain with time. I started telling the truth simply because it was the truth. I told her about women she never knew about lies she never caught. I told her how empty it all was, how every moment of pleasure was followed by a deeper hunger. I didn't dress it up. I didn't justify it. I let it be ugly. She listened. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she asked me to stop because it was enough for the day. And I stopped because boundaries are also a form of love. One afternoon, she brought my son with her. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, eyes guarded. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't explain myself. I told him one thing. "I loved you badly," I said, "and I'm sorry you had to grow up around that." He didn't say much, but before he left, he squeezed my shoulder once. It wasn't healing. It was honest, and that mattered. Margaret and I talked about the end, not in fear, but in planning. She told me she wouldn't promise to be at my bedside every second. She told me she would take breaks, live her life, protect her peace. I agreed fully, freely. That was the moment I understood the final lesson. Love is not proven by suffering for someone. It is proven by choosing yourself without cruelty. On my last good evening, we sat quietly while the sun dipped low, painting the room in gold. I looked at her and felt something close to peace, not because I was forgiven, but because I had finally stopped lying. If I could say one thing to younger men, I said, voice thin but steady. It would be this. Don't confuse silence with acceptance. Don't confuse endurance with love. And don't wait until your body fails to tell the truth your soul already knows. She reached out then, not to care for me, not to rescue me, but to hold my hand. And that was more than I ever deserved. If you're listening to this and you're young, learn from my ruin. Faithfulness is not about rules, it's about courage. Courage to be honest when it's inconvenient. Courage to face yourself before time does it for you. I am close to the grave now. I can feel it. But for the first time in my life, I am not afraid of what I will leave behind, because I finally left the truth. Have you ever seen loyalty like this, where love includes boundaries? What would you have done if you were Margaret, or if you were me? Share your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments.